usually when I'm inspecting, these lines of holes are filled with white water from the washers. It falls out when they flip it over and they move it on to the next section. But I'm thinking, what is that? There's no fucking water in there. They had misaligned some of the tapping machines and they'd gone too far. There's only, so much space, but they'd actually gone into the actual body of the block, and theoretically oil under a lot of pressure and heat and everything could squirt through the holes. Right. So like they didn't even know that happened, but I was a golden-haired child. I mean, he's fabulous. But anyway, the day after, my foreman comes up to me and says, "You better watch your back." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Frank, he's really freaked out about having queer in his department." Now, he was the general foreman of the whole inspection department. And then they started harassing me by doing things like, I couldn't do my job. They'd take me off my job. They go and they shove it over here where there's a 4-foot by 4-foot bin of bolts, and I have to pick up each one and look at it to see if it has threads on it. If it does, it can go into production. If not, it's a reject. I've been there 5 years. I have way too much seniority to be doing this shit, but I can't refuse to do it. The only thing I can do is call for my union steward. Lodge agreements. The union steward goes and talks to them and everything. It takes maybe 5-6 hours to get all this up, and they say, "Oh yeah, he shouldn't be doing it," take it off. But 2 days later, they do the same kind of shit again. That kind of harassment. Yeah. And then to put really the icing on the cake, they come and they give me a disciplinary notice because of absenteeism. And I said, "What absenteeism?" And he says, "Because, on such and such a day." I said, "Wait a minute. I called in. It's registered. I called in. I was going to be away because of personal business." He said, "Well, office doesn't think that's personal business." I said, "How much more fucking personal could it possibly be?" Then he left me. I was working the piston house. He left me. He walked from here to the door, turned around and handed me a second notice for absenteeism. And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Because of that." I said, "You can't give me 2 notices for the same instance." He said, "Oh, yes, we can. There's nothing in the contract that specifies the amount of time that has to pass between notices. It's just you can't be given 2 notices at the same time." So, of course, I grieve that too. But, you get to the point. I got to the point and I thought, why am I putting up with this? It's not like I love this job, the money's good, but I don't need this aggravation in my life. And I eventually walked out that night. But it was really funny because the general manager was usually days, and this was an afternoon shift. He's on days, but that night he was there. And well, anyway, I'm going on and on.
These are
the release forms.
Yes, those are the ethics forms. There's a release form, a bottle release.
Mm-hmm.
You can sign both if you want to keep one.
Okay.
And or you can sign at least one that we will file. So,
okay.
And let me just put that in behind. That's another one that you need to do as well.
I love the model signature.
Yes.
Hey, Kate, can I borrow that case so I have something firm to write upon?
Actually, you want to put that underneath it?
Well, it's better than nothing, I suppose.
And I will take that back.
I didn't know. And that morning, something was pushed in my mail slot at home and said, be at Yonge and Wellesley in the subway station at 8 o'clock, and, or else. It was really, really hilarious because, they from I didn't know this, but there were a group of people and they had a website and they were doing all this shit, you know, there was the committee that was organizing the party, and
Right,
John Campy's parents lived in that condo, which is why they had the
okay.
party room.
right. And I'm just thinking, oh God, how time has passed. So that was 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Okay.
This, I guess, is yours as well.
And you're gonna keep that one? Great.
Yeah, I will.
That's good.
I can do that later.
Okay.
I remember the last time I was signing something like that, it was for a movie, Track 2.
Oh my God.
Yeah, they gave us a penny. Cheap fucking steak. Couldn't give us a penny because they had to actually exchange money.
Wow.
Now, I don't know whether or not that was because of the type of film. It was a documentary. I don't know, but they actually paid us a penny. It was filmed down at Buddy's, you know, where Kristen's used to be on the corner of
Right.
What is that, Gerard and Church, and then in the back part was Buddy's. Yeah, Track 2 many
Yes.
years ago.
Yes. So I'm going to get through the technical stuff first, and I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of this. We've got a green screen behind you.
So will I be in New York? Or what?
Yeah, so you know what that's about. So
You're gonna, I'm gonna be Windsor?
we could get that kind of footage.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, it might be a little more appropriate because like from 72 to 80, I was living in Windsor. In 1980, I came here to Toronto to be the first executive secretary of SEGRO.
Right.
And there were 7 of the gay businesses in the city that had agreed to fund position for a 6-month period, $25 each of them. So for $175, I got to work 180 hours a week, you know.
Right.
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. It was a really hopeful time because the push was on for the amendment to the Human Rights Code, and we felt sure it was going to be coming to a vote, and it did early in '81.
Right.
And that's when Brent Hawkes and Paul Murphy and Del Mansell chained themselves to the railings of the legislature the night that the vote was taken. And that's a hysterical story too.
So hold that.
Yeah.
We'll get that.
Yeah, but in '80 I came here,
Yeah.
and I worked for SEGRO, and
Right.
completely burned out after 6 months. I had been, you know, thinking I had actually been enrolled in the School of Social Work, but I never signed on for 3rd year because I didn't have what they call controlled emotional involvement. I feel the client's pain, I bleed with them. Like, who's going to give me a transfusion every night, you know, that kind of thing. So I never went on to 3rd year, but I had even less controlled emotional involvement when it came to gay liberation because I was at a turning point. It was interesting because I could either take the SEGRO job or I could take the offer that one of the local unions, the QP local union, had made, where they would pay for my tuition to go to law school, give me a living stipend, and pay for all of my books and expenses like that. Once I had actually been called to the bar, I would give the labor community in Windsor commitment that for 5 years, I would take only labor union business. And that was the deal that was there in front of me, and I had to decide, do I go here or do I go there? And I just thought, well, we're at a real juncture here in terms of the Human Rights Code, and I think that this is going to happen, and it's really important that it be done, so I came here instead.
Wow, that's interesting.
Well,
So the green screen, whoops, just lost a light there. Okay, that's fine.
the green screen.
Yes, is for us to use footage that we're gonna drop from the archives based on what people are talking about, just to make it interesting. We're interviewing quite a number of people for this.
If you like, I'll look. I think I actually have the dismissal slip from Ford's.
Wow.
Because, and that, right, that, on that, it's right, because, well, I'll tell you.
Yeah, okay.
You don't have to go through it twice.
Yeah.
I'm only supposed to have an hour's time here.
Right. Right. So that's there for that purpose. As you can see, the camera's on you. I'm going to be edited out. I'm not on camera, and my questions will be edited out. So
Okay.
we're asking people.
And just out of curiosity, your coworker, I'm Harold.
Oh, right, that's right. That's Davina. Davina's our videographer. Yeah.
Okay. There, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I should take this out of the way so
Yeah,
it's
you can
less
maybe just-
distraction.
Yeah. Right, I meant to introduce.
That's okay. I'm a little overwhelming,
Yeah.
like a tidal wave, somebody.
And so we're asking people to work in the question into their answers if they can.
Okay.
You don't have to do this all the time. And in fact, the editing process is probably going to address a lot of that anyway, because we are interviewing a lot of people. And I have a bit of
A lot of
concern.
it may end up on the cutting room
Yes,
floor.
there's that
I
too,
understand
and,
that.
Yeah, you understand that. And I have a concern around one talking head after another, so we want to make this creative. And one of the reasons why you were chosen, because we had a really long list, and of course it was impossible to interview everyone, is because of your history, for that matter. So I don't think you need to be that concerned. If you don't feel like you can make the link to today, that's fine. We can just focus on the history and the basic principles and the tenets of how people operated then and how it guided the movement. And I know from your experience, you have a very colorful experience. In terms of your background, what you were involved with and the whole bit. I mean, I didn't get to see, Davina was sharing with me that she saw the documentary on the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence.
Bad habits.
And I still want to see it. I'm just
Well, if I'm not mistaken, they run it on the iChannel. They have,
Right.
like the day after it was shown at the theater,
Davina was pointing that out to me.
they actually showed it 4 or 5 times the next day, the Sunday.
Right.
And from what I understand, Kevin, the director, producer, had said that it was going to be available from the iChannel as a DVD copy.
So it's those experiences we can drop in this interview.
Okay.
Be it, the sisters, be it Fruit Loops, am I saying that right?
No,
Fruit
cocktail.
Fruit cocktail. That's right, because I do remember that as well. Your work with what was Seagrow, became Sealgrow, and any other groups, and what have you. So on that point, what I wanted to ask you was, do you want me to just put the questions aside for that matter, and we'll just go, like,
I think I'd probably be more comfortable there. If you wanted to afterwards, try and ask me specifics, well, how do you think all of that ties
right,
into?
and I can work that in.
Okay.
With stuff. Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah, okay. I may even at the beginning draw on a few of the questions that we're asking everyone anyway.
Okay.
Just some, I'll look at them and see. Otherwise, we'll just go back into some of the experiences that you had.
Okay.
So, to begin, we are asking everyone to introduce themselves by stating their name and how they identify. Now, I know from your story that you've been with your friend for the last almost a year now, but some people are identifying as activists, as artists, as academic.
Oh,
Or
queer.
any terminology. I'm just going to say any terminology you choose. So if you start with your name and then how you identify.
Okay.
Go ahead, yeah.
I'm Harold Desmarais. I will be 67 next month. I've been involved in lesbian and gay movement since November of 1972. And I wouldn't classify myself as some kind of, groundbreaking hero or anything along that crap. In many ways, I was able to do what I did do because I had protection that most other people in the society lacked. From 1970 through 1975, I worked as a quality control inspector at Ford Motor Company in Windsor. I mean, when I went there, I knew dick all about engines. I'm not a mechanical kind of person. I still don't know how to drive. I learned on the job, although it was a rough experience because they weren't too helpful. They said, well, you've got to check this to make sure that it turns. And I would do it. And then when I found one that didn't, I say, well, this one's not turning. And they said, well, write up a reject tag. And I said, okay, what am I supposed to say? And they said, well, what do you think it is? And I said, I haven't got a clue. And they said, well, what do you think it is? And I said, I told you, I don't know. And they said, well, what do you think it might be? Well, it was turning, and I said, is it a drive shaft? Actually, it was a water pump pulley. But immediately, this guy thinks that's a drive shaft. What an idiot! You know, that kind of learning process. But it turned out that I adapted well, and I learned to be stringently vicious in terms of inspection. It's interesting, Ford Motor Company has a different situation than, say, Chrysler or GM. Their inspection department is a completely independent entity. The other companies are hooked into production. So inspection may have to take a back seat to production. Not so at Ford. At least it wasn't then. And I would reject, one time I rejected more engines than they made. It's just, you know, okay, if something came to my station and it had rejects from the previous line, it should never have gotten to me. So that would go as, you know, missing a piston, it would go as this and that. So I might have 3 rejects on one piece, one motor. But anyway, my foreman came to me that day, at the end of the shift, and he said, I didn't think it was possible, but you rejected more engines than they made. So I used to be the terror of the actual production people, because if a production manager came to me and started pushing, you know, like, don't be so picky, and they would use terminology, and it's offensive and sexist, but I'm accurate historically here. Say, Harold, it's only a cunt hair off. And I said, I didn't make the specs. It either is or it isn't. And he said, what's the big problem? I said, the big problem is that if I let that go through, 2 days from now, another one will come, and you'll say, it's only a cunt hair more than the other one. You let the other one go through. I said, I have nothing to guide me. I said, the specs are the specs. It either passes or it fails. Sorry, you want the specs changed? Go to the department head. And he said, well, why don't you just whistle for the repairman? He could fix that before it even leaves the station, and you could okay it. I said, shh, shh, shh. Can you hear that above all this noise and everything? And he says, well, no. And I said, then how the hell am I supposed to get Wayne's attention? He's over on the other side in the repair bay. And he said, well, okay, I'll deal with that. The next day, he bought me a whistle and a lanyard. Here I am, you know. And the repairman run, I said, there's no oil slingers there, you know, oh, get it, you know, because there's only 3 stations before it goes on to the next line or it's into the repair bay. I tag it and I flag it, and it's going to go in the repair bay unless it's fixed before it gets there. So they would run like hell and fix it all so it wouldn't count as a reject because it went. So, like, I mean, I was a terror in terms of production people. But anyway, Ford Motor Company, back in 1972, had protection in its union contract. One of the grounds upon which discrimination was prohibited was sexual orientation. It's going to take another 14 years before the province of Ontario catches up with them and put sexual orientation into the Human Rights Code. But in 72, I had it. Now, a lot of the other people who were involved in the Windsor group couldn't afford to be the visible face, couldn't be the one that spoke out if a newspaper was covering a demonstration or TV or radio, anything. They couldn't do it because they could lose their jobs. People today forget that 1986 is not that long ago, and until that human rights code was amended to include sexual orientation, people could lose their jobs. A landlord could say, I don't want queers living in my building, and kick their ass out. They could be harassed. There was nothing you could do. Poor John Damien fought for 11 years. He died earlier in the month when the code was finally amended in December of '86. But the thing was, I had protection, and the others didn't. So my brother used to bug me. He said, why you got to carry the flag in the parade? I said, because my job gave me a little cup holder here, see? Anyway, so it wasn't that, I was this heroic figure, that, I was much braver than anyone. I had protection. So that made a big difference.
Could you just remind me again, was that union driven that Ford had that, or?
It was the UAW. It was prior to the CAW's creation, but it was the UAW contract between Ford Motor Company and local, that was local 200 UAW.
And do you know when that was put in, the contract?
I've got a feeling that it went in the contract maybe in 70, maybe 71, I don't know. I know that it was in the contract when I went there.
Wow.
So by the time I got involved in gay liberation in Windsor, with Windsor Gay Unity, it was already there. I mean, I didn't go to my first gay liberation meeting and then, was out the next day at work. I had to undo a lot of the socialization and the brainwashing that, as a member of the society, I was subjected to. And for at least 6 months, it was a consciousness-raising thing. And coming to feel that I was a worthwhile individual, I wasn't sick or perverted or had a mental illness and so on and so forth. So about 6 months, mid-73, I was actually being much more involved and actually took on chairing the group and so on. But as I say, it was the protection that enabled me to do some of the things I did. And I really try to make that point because it's important that I'm not put on some kind of pedestal, because believe me, I'd probably fall off and break. I'm beginning to think at this point in my life, I'm remembering that scene from For the Boys with Bette Midler. And they're doing this retrospective, and she's supposed to go to this big, television extravaganza. And she says to the guy that was sent to pick her up, be careful you don't live too long. Basically, I'm the only one still around from then, so they'll come to you, Fortunately, there are still a lot of activists from my era that are still out there. Thank God.
And you were around at a time when a lot of this was very much in development.
Yeah. Well, I mean, say for instance, John Damien, the racing steward. I knew John personally, and I was so furious at the treatment that the government and the power brokers thumped on him. I mean, they drove him into bankruptcy and then tried to say that his case had no legitimacy because he was bankrupt. I mean, John did all kinds of things. He was selling Amway products at one point, He did whatever he could, but I mean, he had the guts to stand up and fight. And of course, they had no case. That was the big thing. They had no case at all because the Ontario Racing Commissioner, I think his name was McNaughton, was called by a Globe and Mail reporter shortly after the case broke. And he said, well, of course he was fired. What do you expect? He's queer. There was no hiding behind any kind of euphemism. He's a fucking queer. What do you want? We don't want him here. And yet he worked his way up from the stables up to being a racing steward, who's one of the, I think there were only 3 in the province. And they're the ones that make the decisions on the races. If it's a photo finish or anything, they're the ones who decide who won the race and so on. So he was at the top of his game. And yet, first they tried to convince him, well, give us a resignation, we'll give you some money, you know. And he said no, and he fought them. And it was only when he was dying in December of 1986, and he knew he didn't have much time left, that he made some kind of settlement. In my understanding of it, the financial settlement was strictly so that he had some money to give to his sister and her family because they had helped him in the last part of his life. It's a really sad, tragic thing. And young gay people don't know who he was, don't know how hard he fought. And that's the sadness. I think that's the history. I think that's really important, that young gay people, young lesbians, young transsexuals, learn about the past as well as the future. I mean, it's great, and really hope that they continue to forge ahead and create new situations, new lifestyles, and move the entire society ahead. You know, that's good.
I'm glad you shared that. That's an important part of our history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, he was a hero. As a matter of fact, the first thing I did when I came to Toronto, I arrived on a Friday night, and the Saturday morning I was downstairs at the 519 here, doing an auction to raise money for the Committee to Defend John Damian. John Wilson and Bill Zasner, very, very important, ran that committee for years to try and help raise money to meet the legal expenses and stuff. It was really an uphill slog. Because John would go into bars and other gay people would come up to him and say, like, you're the one that's making it hard for the rest of us, you know, you're the one causing all this trouble. Not seeing this as, you know, a fight for their rights as well. But anyway, in my estimation, he's a hero.
And this could lead, in my understanding, into what may have, if I've got the history right, precipitated or a lot of the early work of SEGRO.
Oh yes, because in 1975, I came here to Toronto as the Windsor delegate, and we were meeting over on Winchester at the community center, and we created SEGRO because there had been a discussion at a conference that was held at the University of Waterloo, I believe. And they thought that we needed to have a provincial organization to coordinate activity between the various groups, many of which were situated on university campuses around the province. So yes, I was there at that founding meeting, and one of the big reasons behind SEGRO was to get behind John Damian and to help him fight for that case and to set some precedents in terms of law, because the Human Rights Commission said, I'm sorry, but we don't have any kind of coverage. We've got no reason to, we sympathize with you, we think it's wrong, but we don't have any legal way of taking them to task for that. And that's what John fought through the courts for those 11 years.
And do you want to talk a bit about that time? Well, actually, let me just focus this a bit. So back then, SEGRO, amongst a number of other early groups, they were coming together. Like the groups were starting to get formed. There was, the body politic that was coming out as
well, the body politic is, as always, my evaluation of watershed events within the past 40 years, the establishment of the body politic is, number one, because that provided the most important tool for lesbians and gays across the province, across the country actually, because there was a tool of communication. You had a way of getting information out to other people who were fighting the same battle that you were, perhaps in different locations. You had a way of connecting with other people. I can remember originally coming across a copy of the Body Politic at a left-wing bookstore in Windsor, and I read an article that was written, I believe, by Gerald Hannon, in which he had talked about how the candidates at the federal election, the previous election, had responded to the questionnaire that was sent out to all of the federal candidates about their position on lesbian and gay rights. I called Toronto to the Body Politic office and asked, and Gerald happened to be there that Saturday morning, and I chatted with him because I called him because I said, I thought you might find it interesting to get feedback of what it was like in a committee room when that questionnaire arrived. I said I was working full time because I was working at Ford during election campaigns, whether provincial or federal. I was very involved in the NDP, the Ontario NDP, and very involved in the riding association. Actually got them to pass resolutions where they are endorsing the changes to the Human Rights Code. I got it done at the local level, at the regional level. I even came here to Toronto and got it pushed through at provincial council. But I was there as a full-time paid worker. The UAW would authorize a leave of absence from Fort. I would be seconded to the riding association to work full-time either as a canvas organizer, as an office manager, whatever. I did different tasks in different campaigns. But I was there doing this federal election. And I mean, I was the only one who was pushing and saying, hey, we're supposed to stand up for the rights of everybody. You think it's right? You might not agree, that this person has the right to have sex with people of their own sex. If that's the only way that you can determine it. But do you think it's right because who they go to bed with, they can be thrown out of their job, they can be evicted from their home? Do you think that's right? Is that fair? Is that the kind of policy that this party has? And I had to fight tooth and nail to get them to, put it. It was quite interesting because it was years later, the campaign manager came to me privately and commended me for that fight because he was a closet gay man. He was married and had children, but he was a closet gay. And he said, I couldn't say anything myself, but I was so proud of you doing it, But anyway, I called Gerald Hannon and I chatted with him. And then he said to me, well, are you involved with the Windsor group? And I said, there's a group in Windsor? So then I went to the Windsor group meeting, and as I say, started down that path. But it was because of the body politic. If I hadn't seen the paper, if I hadn't read the article, if I hadn't called Gerald, all of those dominoes had to fall for me to end up a gay liberationist.
And the creation of those things, the body politic, the various groups, including CGRO at the time, my question is now coming to, just as you said, becoming a gay liberationist. What was that? What is being a gay liberationist? What is gay liberation?
More than anything else, to me, I think it meant me being openly gay and proud of who I was. I remember when I told my younger sister, I have 6 siblings, 3 brothers, 3 sisters. My younger sister asked me, and actually I was working an election campaign at that time, and she came to the election headquarters because she hadn't seen me for a couple of weeks because it's a 24-hour job, 24-hour day job. Election campaigns are madness. But she hadn't seen me. She said, well, come on, we'll go out to supper. So I took a break. And then in the car, she said to me, your friend Bob is kind of femmy. And I said, femmy? Well, that's feminine. And I said, oh, well, that's who he is. And then she said, but you know, Liz is like that too, another friend. Then I said, yeah, so what are you saying? She said, well, are you or aren't you? And I said, am I or am I not what? She said, you know. And I said, no, I want you to tell me. What do I know? Well, are you queer? And I said, you want the truth? You want me to lie to you? She said, no, I want the truth. And I said, yes, I am. I'm a gay man. I don't think that I will change that. I said, heterosexually speaking, I'm still a virgin. I said, I don't think that'll change either. I said, Mommy and Daddy aren't getting any grandkids out of these loins. You know what I'm saying here? And she got upset. And I said, I only ask two things from you. I said, don't lie about me. If someone says that, say, yeah, he is. And don't make excuses for me. Okay? Just accept me for who I am. And if people can't do that, then fuck off out of my life. I've got no more time for you. Okay? So I realized that she had accepted that about 2 months later. I was going to do laundry, and she said, well, I'll run you over to this laundromat, and then, you know, we can blah, blah, blah. So she did. She ran off to do something else. I was still in the laundromat drying the clothes, and they closed because they want no more people coming in, and when you're finished, that's it. So she came to the door, and he said, no, we're closed, and she knocked on the door. He said, no, we're closed. He said, no, I'm with him. And the guy said to me, well, is she with you? And before I could say anything, she yells, yeah, we're sisters. I thought, well, I guess she's processed it. But anyway, it's interesting because throughout my life as an openly gay man, I've had a couple of experiences like that with straight people that showed me that if you're open and you're proud and you don't make excuses and you just allow them, either I'll accept them or I won't, then they can surprise the hell out of you. One time, for my birthday, I was the office manager at this company, and 8 or 10 other people in the office got together, got a birthday cake that actually bought me a purse, a male purse, okay? And now this is probably be about 1982 or so. And it was lovely purse. And Adele, who was the spearhead behind that, said to me after I opened it, I said, oh, it's lovely, thank you very much. Afterwards, she said to me privately, you're not offended or anything, are you? So I took the purse and I slapped her with it. I said, silly girl, But, and another time when I was working, and this is the last job that I had, where I was working as the office manager for a trucking firm. Okay, so I get to boss 14 other truckers around, and they are not happy about stuff like that. And there was one instance where one of the drivers was very resistant to doing what he was supposed to be doing, and I said, I want you to come to the office when you're finished this afternoon, because the office was upstairs, and they would do their circle check and then drive away in their cars. But I wanted him to talk to him about these problems. And I said, Carlos, you have to come to the, and he cut me off the radio, he just turned it on. So I went to the owner of the company, who I had gone to university with, and I said to him, Ram, I said, I cannot do my job if your drivers can just turn me off when they don't want to hear something. He said, I'll speak to Carlos. Okay, now I left 5 o'clock, went home. Carlos didn't get there till 6. And Ram gave him a dressing down and chewed him out. And Carlos said to Ram, well, he's such a lady. And Ram chewed him out about that too. because Ram, even back in the 70s, was very, very supportive. And a straight man, secure in his sexuality, he would actually hug me in public, you know. But the next morning, I hear all about this from Murray, who is the dispatcher who was there at the time. And I said, but Ram, I said, you've got to understand, first of all, Carlos is Latin American. He's very tied into that machismo thing. He's Roman Catholic, and he's really, really uptight about gays. I said, to Carlos's mind, I said, he probably thinks I run home, strip out of my clothes, get dressed up in a dress, and, can't wait to have someone bend me over a chair and fuck the hell out of me. Now, there's not a 2-second interval between me saying, fuck the hell out of me, Murray turning around and saying, oh, you wish. And I thought, those kinds of experiences could never have happened if there wasn't that sense of trust and comfort level. That, okay, so he's gay, okay, but I got blue eyes. It didn't mean anything except in particular situations. But I thought that is so wonderful, because that's the other thing that I found so frequently over the years. Even though someone was deeply entrenched in their homophobic attitudes, sometimes they would initiate a conversation where you could actually challenge some of those attitudes and maybe inch them forward a bit. Because I remember different instances where they confronted me and they've reaffirmed, they think that I'm a sick fuck because I'm put. But I admire your balls for having the courage to stand up and fight for what you believe in. So there was a grudging admiration for the willingness to say, I am who I am and you have no right to step on me. Because that's a thing that was thrown in my face so many times. Well, if he's not ashamed of it, why is he hiding it? He's hiding it so he can keep a job. He's hiding it so he won't be out on the street. He's hiding it because his family react in certain ways. A close friend of mine divorced his wife after trying for 5 years to make the marriage work. And his wife, Chris, knew that he was gay when they got married, but she said, I'll cure you of that. And he really loved her, and they were good friends, but they found that they were drifting farther and further apart, and there's so much tension and so much anger and frustration. And eventually they agreed that they wanted to divorce and stay friends. Telling the families was the problem. Roy's father was very demanding. Well, why are you and Chris breaking up? What's wrong? I want to know. And just kept pushing. And Roy said to him, well, I'm a gay man. I'm unhappy. Chris is unhappy. And we have no reason to be. I want to be who I am. And his father, without a second's hesitation, said, well, if that's the reason, I hope you have the decency to kill yourself. Can you imagine the kind of rejection and nullification of your entire being when a parent says that? Just awful. So, like me, kept it hidden because they didn't need that kind of aggravation. But the concept of being open and proud about who you are and putting it out there, and if they can deal with it, if they can learn from it, if they can somehow or other absorb it and move on with the relationship with you, fine. If they can't, tough. Some will, some won't. So what?
And obviously that was a real courageous move on the part of many of you who did that at that time without protection, without society support. I'm just wondering, as you met others through these varying groups, whether it was in Windsor, whether it was when you moved to Toronto and afterwards, be it Seagrove, be it the Sisters, be it Fruit Cocktail, what guided all of you? I mean, what I learned about these people were you all made that courageous move of being isolationist existence.
Well, I don't know that there are any set tenets. And I do believe that in many ways, the degree of openness was a continuum kind of thing. That some people could be open about who they were and proud of that in certain situations. But, I mean, that doesn't mean I tell everyone I meet on the street, hi, I'm Harold, I'm queer. The choice was made by each individual as to how comfortable they were and in which situations they would feel safe enough to do that. And as I said, it's a big choice. Are you going to be proud of who you are and open of who you are if it means that the job that you've worked hard to achieve, what kind of success you have in the business world or wherever, will be snatched away from you? And do you think that a recommendation from a previous employer who had fired you because you were a gay or a lesbian, that you think that they were going to speak highly of you to a prospective new employer? Not too easily. I mean, that was interesting because after I was faced with that situation in a way, because when I left Seagrow, I had to find another job. And I deliberately put together a curriculum vitae that I thought would blow the socks off of anybody who was looking at me as a prospective applicant for a job. And I included in that all of my community work, both lesbian and gay community and the general community. And I went through year by year. So, I mean, it was something like a 22-page booklet that I sent out when I was applying for a job, because I thought, I want them to first look at it. And secondly, see past the fact that my last recommendation, letter of recommendation, came from the Coalition for Lesbian and Gay Rights in Ontario. I mean, they were my employer, and that's who I worked for, and this is the job that I did. Yeah. So I recognize the reality of the employment situation. I was fortunate in that the company that ended up hiring me, a business supply company where Adele and the person were, they knew a friend of mine was one of their employees, and he took my curriculum vitae into them, and it just so happened that my skill set really meshed with their business as it was at that point in time, because they had been salesmen. They're both the treasurer and president salesmen, and they had tremendous sales force, and they were the first ones to do telephone marketing of typewriter ribbons and lift-off tapes right across the country. They ended up being the second largest consumer purchaser of the Selectric 2 typewriter cassettes and lift-off tapes after Grand & Toy. Grand & Toy was the biggest purchaser, and Network Business Supplies was number 2. And it was because they were salesmen. They were doing so well, even though they didn't really have an office system or anything in there, that the money just kept coming in, a good portion of it, even though they had hundreds of thousands of dollars in over 90-day receivables and stuff, and no real system to deal with any of it. And I went in there, and within 4 months, I had turned that company around and really got it organized, so that by the time that they had implemented all the systems, maybe only 10% of their over 90-day receivables got carried over. I was very successful that way. But that was because my skill set matched their needs. And I actually got a recommendation from someone who was within the organization. So, but it's a very real concern. I mean, you don't have the opportunity to pick and choose your jobs, especially if you're carrying a label that's on your forehead, and people make all kinds of judgments about who you are, who you might be, what kinds of values you have, because homosexual. So people made decisions that were grounded in the reality of their lives and they could be open and proud to varying degrees along the continuum. Very much like the sex. Exclusive, da 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 da. I'm down here with the 4%. I'm holding true.
You've also been involved in creative aspects of the community and more humorous and subversive in many ways. You know? And I'm not here to talk about that.
That's something very dear to my heart. That whole phenomenon that was known as fruit cocktail. It started in 1981, 81, 83, 85, 87, 89, 91. No, 1983, I guess, would be the very first one. 83, 85, 87, 89, 91, 93, and 95. There were 7, yes, so 1983. And it was an explosion of creativity and pride. It was so wonderful because it's still 83, it's still 3 years before you have protection in the code. But the community came together and said, we have all this wonderful talent. Let's do a show like Mickey and Judy. Oh, let's rent a barn and do a show. You know, they rented the Ryerson Theater, and I tell you, that first fruit cocktail was absolutely magical. It truly was. We didn't even get to have a dress rehearsal because we only got into the theater, I think, the day before the opening night. And they had so many lighting and sound cues and everything else. They were still going through the ends of it when it was time to open the doors. There were people lined up from the Ryerson Theater down to Church Street, down Church Street, okay, because there's a sold-out house, and everybody had heard about it and wondered, you know, what a wonderful, because hundreds, actually, I'm sure there's more than 125 people that were involved in the first one, both on stage and backstage, and everybody wanted to see it. And there was such, when we went out at the rehearsal, like they told us, well, there won't be any dress rehearsal, we're just going. So the first performance was the dress rehearsal, and it was magic. Everything just fit together. Everything worked. It was flawless. It really was. And I mean, if you look at that videotape of that, well, you'd be really lucky because I haven't been able to find it. I know that there was one done because I saw it being played on a television at a cast party about a month after the end of the show. It was a cast party on Dufferin Street at someone's loft. And I saw the video. It was playing. So the video exists, but I haven't been able to track it down in all these years. It's not at the archives. And I don't know who has the copy. I don't know how many copies were made. Not a lot, I'm sure. I have copies of all of the other fruit cocktails. I mean, there was a videotape made for historical archival purposes, and no one else was supposed to get it. Because when we moved to the Winter Garden Theater, when we were at the Winter Garden for 3 shows, the last 3 shows at the Winter Garden, they wanted an extra $35,000 if you were going to do a video because you're using their background, you know, on top of your rental fees and everything else. So of course they couldn't. But I mean, it was done in such a way that the stage manager would come out and say, now they're doing a video for archival purposes only. It's strictly archival historical record. So you won't be able to get a copy of it. So, I mean, that's something that everyone has to accept, okay? You know, talking about a mixed message. So a lot of us signed up for a copy, and I fortunately have a complete set. But it was a wonderful explosion of pride and talent. Like, this is our community. This is what we can do. Look at us, aren't we great? And I was one of the individuals who's chosen to be one of the fruits. There were 5 fruit. There was a banana, an orange, a plum, an apple, and grapes. seedless green grapes, semois. And so at the intermission, the fruit went out to talk to the people in the crowd that would come outside for a smoke or whatever at the intermission. And I heard things like, I heard people expressing how proud they were to be a part of a community that could do something like this. You know, the monies raised were going to the Lesbian and Gay Community Appeal. Now, Community 1, I understand. If you can't say something good, don't say anything at all. We did, that was actually a line in one of the fruit cocktails where the fruit were all doing Betty Davis impersonations, and we said, you know, they say you should only speak good of the dead. Joan Crawford is dead. Good. So, but the fruit were just sort of the standard bearers. We were like, of course, the fruit being hams that they are, especially the kiwi. Jeremy, I love you dearly, but you are a ham of the utmost quality. Westphalian ham, top quality, I swear. But we would, you know, be a focal point. Like the fruit would be in the Pride Day parades. We would go out to bars and pass out leaflets and stuff like that. A sort of walking soundbite, for lack of better words. And I was fortunate in that I continued to be involved in all 7 of the productions. There's actually only 2 people, Jeremy Vincent, the Kiwi, because like the fruit were all made up of foam costumes and stuff like that, and they were pushed and shoved and folded and stapled and mutilated over the years. And by the time the 87 show came around, they were in pretty bad shape, so they decided they were going to make new costumes, and they would also yuppie-ize the fruit. So all of a sudden, the apple and the grapes, the plum bit the dust. They kept the banana, they kept the orange, but then they added a kiwi, a box of blueberries, a pineapple, and a tomato, which is a fruit. In the very first show she was in, she fought viciously to make sure that everyone knew she was a fruit, not a vegetable. At any rate, I metamorphized from a set of green seedless grapes into a pineapple. I'm not sure how I did that. I didn't even have to weave a cocoon or anything, it just happened. And so Jeremy, who later played the kiwi, he wasn't the very first kiwi, he was in the other shows as well, but he and I are the only ones that were in all 7 of the shows. And it's a wonderful, wonderful piece of history, which unfortunately a lot of the people who are under 30 have never even heard of. I mean, the last one was 95, and unfortunately they had tried to extend it over 2 weeks so that it would be like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 2 shows, Sunday, 2 shows, and the same thing the second week. They didn't get the volume of attendance that they should have, and it ended up costing, well, I'm not sure, but somewhere between $10,000 and $30,000. So the appeal felt that, you know, we're in the business of trying to raise money. We're not in the business of doing shows, and this didn't work, and they just closed the book on it. But it was a wonderful, wonderful thing. It was a tremendous consciousness-raising thing for the people in the audience too, because they didn't mince words, and the skits and the little vignettes that they showed on stage, because it was kind of like a variety show. Like for instance, I remember Grant Cowan and a couple of other guys who were talking in this. They were singing a song, and now when you're doing a screen test, when you go to pee, they're at urinals, you know, because of the cops using hidden cameras in various washrooms, like at the St. Charles and different places like that. So it says now you're doing a screen test when you take a pee, you know. But I mean, they tackled the issues, the things that were relevant to people's lives, and did it with humor and a wonderful sense of fun. And I think that it made people feel good about who they were and about being part of a wonderful community that had such a wealth of talent. And it was sad because as Fruit Cocktail went on, the AIDS crisis also focused in on there. Lost hundreds of people, hundreds, really. Because I think if you look at the number over the 7 Fruit Cocktails, I'm sure there's probably 1,400 people in all who were involved in various ways. And that I'm sure that of that, 300, 400, 500 of them are dead now. And they shouldn't have been, but that's what AIDS did.
And in addition to that, you had another experience with the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence.
Yes, I had the unique honor of being their first recruit. I was not one of the holy foundresses of the order, but I was their first recruit. They saw me and thought, there's a ham we can use. So, because I don't feel that I'm exceptionally talented. I mean, I can carry a tune, although I certainly don't feel that I should be out there on American Idol. First of all, I'd go to Canadian Idol. But no, I think it was a sort of a sense of, well, that one's wild enough, we could probably use them. And it turned out that the persona that I was Sister Atrociata von Tasteless. And I use the title von Tasteless because I determined that in kind of an homage to the wonderful nuns of Europe who have the most outrageous headdresses that are left over from 13th, 14th century. I would create different cornices, different headdresses, and all the other nuns were pretty run. This is the holy rule, okay, but I was given free rein to be as outrageous and wild as I want to be. Like if it was fruit and flowers and a dove on my head, okay, that's fine too. Or if it was a construction helmet, like, didn't matter. I was able to carry it off because I was von Tasteless, old Westphalian family, once again Westphalian ham, you know. And I continued on with the sisters until 1986 when the Toronto chapter decided to disband. We had done a plebiscite. We'd actually had a full page, well, no, quarter-page ad in extra asking if for feedback from the community. We said the sisters are reevaluating their relevance to the community and your input would be greatly appreciated. And we got about 46 responses, which the people at Extra were very surprised at. But the vast majority were wildly enthusiastic and favorable. They thought it was great. There were a couple of religious right, you know, you were burned in hell, you know, you should have a bayonet shoved up your ass. Oh, thank you very much, it's not my scene. And there was one from a woman, a close lesbian friend of mine. I knew who the author was, although the other sisters didn't. She said that even though she understood that we were not anti-church, we were not anti-nun, we were not anti-woman, we were pro-joy, anti-guilt. The sisters were dedicated to the promulgation of joy and the expiation of guilt. Have some guilt disposal bags at home still left over. I could send you one if you ever need it. Even though she understood, she said, you have to realize that people perceive at their own level of consciousness. Their perception validates itself. It doesn't matter whether or not it's what you wanted them to think or what you hoped they would think or the message you were trying to give to them. How they perceive you is how they perceive you. And you are going to have to figure out how you're going to address that issue because you're not coming across the way you would like to. And we like a dog with a bone, we chewed at it for a long time, you know, the next couple of meetings of the sisters. And we finally decided that we had two options. We could let it go, or we could try and spend a lot of time and energy explaining to everyone who we were and what we were trying to do, which would leave very little time and energy to do what you wanted to do. I mean, we used to get together and we used to join hands and we used to chant at the beginning of our communions, we are the sisters of a new order. We are the sisters spreading joy, not the church and not the state. We as nuns control our fate. You know, so that was our message. That's what we wanted to do. And it was sad that we felt we didn't have much in the way of options to either let it go or, you know, put ourselves in a really untenable position. So we did let it go. And it was interesting that it's only recently that there's a resurgence of interest in the sisters. Like San Francisco has never stopped. But in other areas, not only in the United States, but in other countries as well, the sisters are reasserting themselves. Perhaps we were just a little too early for our time. I don't know.
And during that time, I'm just curious, what did happen? What did these sisters do? What was the message?
Well, the message always was expiation of guilt and promulgation of joy. So we would have events that would help promote joy. Like we used to have teas here at the 519. We ended up buying, I think it was 12 dozen china cups from the restaurant supplier on Spadina. And we would have these teas where we would have invite the entire community, say, come have tea with the sisters at the 519 on such and such a day. And we had songbooks. We created songbooks where we revamped the lyrics to various songs, like Your Sun Will Come Out Tomorrow, or let's see, well, one of my favorites was from My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean. My body lies over his face now. My body lies stretched out in bed. My body is tense with desire as my partner is giving me head. Oh, I'll give you, I'll give you my body for free, for free. Give you, I'll give you my body for free. My body was licked by his tongue, dear. My body was stroked by his hands. Our lust has been totally sated. Now let's go have breakfast at Fran's. You know, so we would do songs like that, or I mean, a sister flagellation of forbidden fruit had a particular offering where it was, please regrease me. I thought, sister. Or there was another song where we did, you know, boys in white dresses with pink satin sashes, old men who come on my nose and eyelashes, handsome young sailors all tied up with strings. These are a few of my favorite things. When the dog bites, no, that's the real one, sorry. Oh, when the cops raid, oh, when the straights preach, I simply remember my favorite things and then I don't feel so bad. The lyrics go on, but I mean, we had songs like that in the songbook. We also had, you know, regular lyrics on some songs. I think it's maybe about 30 pages long or something, and we would get people to sing the songs, and that was a tremendously liberating thing for them to do. I mean, can you imagine, you know, singing a song like "Please Regrease Me"? Oh my Lord, you know, or you know, he'll be coming on the mountain when he comes. Oh, he'll be coming on the mountain when he comes. And Sister Slesia, the eldest nun in the order, Basil Latham, sweet man, died years ago. He was very, very involved with the 519 Center. Most of the sisters had other involvements in other areas. They didn't just come to the sisters and that was their initiation into the lesbian and gay movement. But Basil was the subject of a song of homage. You're a grand old fag, you're a high-stepping fag, and forever we know you'll be here. You know, it was a fun thing. Now we had solstice skating parties in the winter. We had maypole gatherings on the 1st of May, where you know it's May, a libelous display, and getting people to come out and just have fun. On Pride Day, we had a big banner, the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence recruiting booth and guilt disposal station. And people would come up and ask us to marry them. Say, well, okay, sure, you know. And there were, like, one time a group of 6 said, can you marry us all to each other? Certainly, not a problem, you know. So, you know, do you and you, take you and you. Everyone's married now, you know. We used to give them guilt-free certificates if they did the actual process of ridding themselves of guilt, like centering it into their body, the instructions on the outside of the bag, and then exhaling it. And then, you know, you can get rid of it by putting it in a blender. You could leave it on a church lamp. I mean, who knows? Anyway, if you go through the process and you're now guilt-free, we'll give you a certificate that says that. We went to protests, like when Anita Bryant came here. We had a little flyer that said, ride the rails with the sisters, and showed a sister leaning out of the subway car blowing a whistle. And we waited, we said, we'll meet at Yonge and Bloor. Well, we waited about 10 minutes past the time we said we were going to leave, and there were only maybe about 60 people. But we said, we've got to go, so we go downstairs. There on the northbound platform are 200 more who've been waiting there, waiting for us to show up on the platform. And we went up to, is it Lawrence? Maybe Lawrence. The People's Church, whatever that street is. And we walked from Yonge, marched over to the People's Church. And, you know, we involved ourselves, the sisters were very involved in the demonstration after the bath raids in '81. We were a part of the community. We would go by the hassle-free clinic, which used to be across the street upstairs, and we would give people perpetual indulgence rain checks because we wanted to promote the idea you must act responsibly. If you contract a sexually transmitted disease, it happens. Deal with it. Deal with it responsibly, and under no circumstances spread it any further. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be looking forward for future possibilities. So the perpetual indulgent rain check was like a rain check at the store. If you wanted to buy something and they were out of it, they give you a rain check, come back later. And this had a whole list of various things that you could tick off, whatever you want. And you say, I find you sexually desirable. However, my goodies are temporarily off limits. However, I would like to explore future possibilities with you. Please, yeah, and you could tick off everything from a cuddle fest, a ambisexual cuddle fest, to a fuck you won't forget, to my favorite was a uvular massage. That was my favorite. And I guess because a lot of people don't even know what a uvula is. I have an interesting story, but we won't go there. It's that little thing that dangles at the back of your throat. People think that's your tonsils. It's not your tonsils, it's your uvula. But anyway, you could give that to someone else who was there at the clinic, you know? So you had no sense of guilt or shame because you got a sexually transmittable disease. The sisters prepared a pamphlet called Come Clean, where we laid out all of the various sexually transmittable diseases that were raging their way through the community, and symptoms and treatment and so on and so forth. And at that time, when we first did it, they didn't even know AIDS. It was GRID, gay-related immune deficiency. Okay. And then 2 years later, we reprinted the pamphlet and brought it up to date and reprinted it and gave out thousands of those. We applied for a grant from the Lesbian and Gay Community Appeal, and they helped us with the production costs of thousands of those pamphlets. So we were giving out information and providing a sense of, you know, responsibility. Not to give up fun, and you don't have to give up, and you're not a leper, and you don't have to go to the colony. Just act responsibly. So in many ways, I think the sisters were a very good influence in the community, and the timing with dovetailing with the AIDS crisis, I think, was important too, because one of the comments that came back after the plebiscite was that a person said that if I stay free of AIDS, It's because a nun gave me condoms and a pamphlet and the sense of responsibility that I should have about my health and stuff like that. So it's wonderful, just wonderful stuff.
That's great.
Mm.
You've shared amazing stories. This has been incredible.
Oh, tune in next week.
Is there anything that you wanted to share that you didn't get a chance to? Any comments, any insights, any experiences that you want to get across before we conclude?
Well, I guess just to underline the concept that I think if you're open and proud about who you are, and you don't make excuses and you don't make explanations to, well, because of this, if people are upset about the fact that you're there in their world, and I have had that. I was at a university physical education class, the University of Windsor. The instructor had invited Windsor Gay Unity to send someone to speak to the members of the class. These are college kids who had a lot of really fucked up ideas about homosexuals and lesbians. And so I was there, and one person said to me, well, don't you want to have children? And I said, I don't think that the genetic package I have is so superlative that it needs replicating. I said, if I truly felt that I wanted a child as a part of my life, if I wanted the joyous responsibility of raising a child to adulthood, and it's a big responsibility, and unfortunately most people are not trained for this most important job in our society. Just because you can breed doesn't necessarily mean you should breed. A lot of children are out there that are still trying to put their heads back on straight after, excuse the expression, after dealing with their families. I said, there are so many unwanted, unloved children in this world already. I shouldn't have a hard time finding one. And this person was not pleased with that response and said, well, what the hell good are you? And one of the other people in the class, a woman in the class, said, oh, that is so rude. And I said, well, my response to that is, first of all, I'm not sure how you evaluate whether a person is good or not. If you want to give me a list of criteria, I'll try to check off the ones that I honestly, objectively think I might possess. I said, secondly, there are lots of people out there who are constantly questioning themselves on this type of topic. I said, and it's really, really nice to know at last there's someone that they can go to get a definitive answer. You know? But yeah, like my humanity is completely negated because I'm not going to breed. Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. So I guess my point is that sometimes just by being who you are and being out there, sometimes that cognitive dissonance that people have between what they think lesbians and gays and transsexuals are like and what the people that they know, well, he's a lesbian, a gay, a transsexual, they aren't jiving. And I found that when I was working as a quality control inspector at Ford's, that I would be in a position in a specific section of the plant, and I would be there for 3 months before I was rotated on to another position. And usually there would be people who were either in close proximity to me because they were doing a job that required installation at that particular place, or they're a repairman that's working with the inspector for rejects and stuff like that. And after about a month and a half, 2 months, I would find they would come to me and say, you know, when you first came here, I heard a lot of guys saying that you were queer. But you know, you're an okay guy. I said, it's true. I'm an okay guy, and I am queer. So all of a sudden, there's this real butting heads. Like, this is not what I thought queers were supposed to be like. And I know what he's like because I work with him for the last 2 months every day, and I know, and so on and so forth. And I had a wonderful experience with another inspector one time because there were only the two of us working on the engines, and the nearest people were about 60 feet away down the line. And so if I didn't talk to this person, no one would. And I'm the type of person that if I'm upset or I'm troubled about something, I withdraw. I'm usually pretty outgoing, but I withdraw. Because when I'm in that mood, you could say, good morning. Yeah. So I don't like to be that way, so I try to withdraw. And it was interesting. I was so upset. I never said a word. I said hi to Bill when he was first starting the shift. And I, working away, so 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock, not a word. 8 to 8:30 is lunch hour. 8:30 to 9:30. Finally, he couldn't stand it any minute longer. He comes, he said, what the hell's the matter with you? What the hell is the matter with you? Because honestly, like usually you got jokes, you got stories, it makes the day go by, but you haven't said a goddamn word. Now, at this time, when I was working at Ford's, it's early, and I hadn't yet gotten to the gay liberation part yet. Okay, so I wasn't the plant faggot at that moment in time. I was just another inspector. Some people thought was queer. But anyway, I just didn't want to deal with it. I just said to him, well, if you must know, I'm sexually frustrated. And he said, oh, he said, you know, like I got married last year. He says, I got a couple of women. No, they're not bed pigs or anything like that. They're good, they like a good time. So I could give you their numbers, and you could, you know, so solicitous. At which point I'm thinking, oh, do I really need this? So I said to him, Bill, you wouldn't even know what turns me on. So he says, well, what kind of woman does? I'm thinking brackets none. But I said, well, because I'm evil, I truly am. I said, well, she has to be at least 6'2". She can't weigh an ounce more than 100 pounds. I want her to have long, stringy, blonde hair. I said, I want her to arrive at my home in a raincoat carrying a bowl of spaghetti. Whatever concoction of shit came out of my mind at that moment. And he was wonderful. It wasn't a second later. He says, no problem. I thought it was wonderful. It was really wonderful. Fortunately, it wasn't during my gay liberation days, but it's still a lovely story.
Thank you so much.
No
This
problem.
has been incredible.
Well, I hope it helps.
Yeah.
I hope it helps.
Oh, in a major way. In a major way.
So you got that stuff about the Ford and the disciplinary stuff and stuff like that, because if you didn't, it's not worth even, you know, showing the.
Right. I'm trying to remember the beginning of this interview. Did you?
Well, I hadn't signed anything or anything. We were talking about that.
Was this running or?
I don't think it was.
It was.
Well, it may be there. You know.
Okay. So when we do the review on it.
Okay, if it's something that you think that you want,
yeah,
and
we could-
because I'm pretty sure I still have it somewhere at home.
Right, and I mean, there's that piece that I've noted, and you have a lot of things at home that might be of interest to us.
Okay.
We're in post-production.
You want me to pull out some of the stuff from the sisters?
We can be in touch with you at that time.
Okay, and actually,
You got.
well, there's an interesting thing that because it was back in '98, would that be? No, in 2008. It would be 25 years from the first one, which was 1983. And we decided to have a get-together and see whether or not there was any interest in people trying to get another fruit cocktail off the ground. And someone helped me by taking the old VHS tapes from the fruit cocktails and did I guess maybe a 45-minute compilation of various bits and pieces. And I have that on a DVD, so if you want to borrow that, you might be able to find some things that because like there's some of the really delightful skits, like my boyfriend's, how's this? It's a song, but the song is, he's got the biggest schlong in town. You know, you've got a barbershop trio here that are singing. You know, there's a lot of fun stuff there that doesn't shy away from the sexual aspect. You know, and I thought that was an important thing too, because people felt so ashamed, and they didn't have to. So, but yeah, of course.
Good. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Well,
and I'm so glad we did it.